What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. We got a really jam-packed episode for you guys this afternoon. We're going to be talking about Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Hopkins' potential impact if they were to get signed by the New England Patriots. Are the Patriots a playoff team if they land D-Hop and Dalvin Cook? How good are the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets going to be? The Buffalo Bills seem to be a team that most people are starting to sour over now. You got the whole locker room issues with Stefon Diggs currently being a little bit disgruntled. The New York Jets, they have Aaron Rodgers, but there's either 50% of people out there who think that the Green Bay Packers are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL this year with A-Rod, and the other 50% of people out there think that this is going to crash and burn and it's not going to work out. And then, what are the keys to the Cleveland Browns having a successful season this year? What do they need to do and who do they need to step up in order for them to have a shot at being able to make it to the playoffs? And lastly, we're going to be talking about USC football. Is this defense going to be good enough for them to make it into the college football playoffs in 2023? Before we get into it, if you haven't already and you're new, make sure that you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember that you can listen to the audio version of the podcast available on all podcasting platforms. We're not just available on YouTube. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. And lastly, make sure that you guys follow me on all of my social media platforms, man. You can find me on Instagram at JT_, on Twitter at JT__, and we are now on Threads, people. Threads just came out a couple of days ago, and we've been on that joint pretty heavily, so make sure that you guys go ahead and follow us on Threads as well at JT_. DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook, according to some reports, the Patriots have been in contact with these two guys. And if the Patriots were to land both DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook, how would this impact them? Would they be a playoff team, or are they still going to be a team who would be on the outside looking in of the playoff conversation? Let's talk about how DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin will impact the Patriots season this year. Now, currently right now, they probably are considered to be the worst team in the AFC East. And if they get DeAndre Hopkins, they will have a true number one threat on the outside. Don't know what they were doing, thinking about extending the DeAndre Parker. Can't remember his name right now, but that was an awful contract. He's not really good at separating. And Devontae Parker, I finally remember his name now. The only time he was really good for New England was during 50-50 ball situations. If you get DeAndre Hopkins, you're going to have somebody who's going to be able to get open. You're going to have somebody who's going to be a really great option for Mac Jones to throw the football downfield to. And you already do have Kendrick Bourne. You got a pretty good group of tight ends. So if you can get DeAndre Hopkins, that would drastically alter your passing game. And then you add Dalvin Cook. The Patriots have always been a team that's went 1 and 2 at the running back position. They normally just don't rely on one back. Last year, we all know how good Ramondre Stevenson was, but they also did have Damian Harris, who now is with the Buffalo Bills. So if you get Dalvin Cook and Ramondre Stevenson in the same backfield, you're going to have one of the best running back duos in the league. And the Patriots' offensive line wasn't that great last year. The offensive line normally is a pretty big strong point for New England. So Bill Belichick and company, I do expect the offensive line to be a little bit better than what it was last season. You're going to have Cole Strange going into year 2. So when you look at New England, having DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook on the same team, I still don't know if that elevates them to not being the fourth best team in this division still. The Buffalo Bills still have a way better roster than New England. You got Josh Allen at QB. You're going to have a really good group of receivers. You're going to have Stefon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and you're going to have a phenomenal defense. And what about the Miami Dolphins? Like, the Miami Dolphins arguably have one of the best roster, if not the best roster in the NFL this year. And then you look at the New York Jets. I mean, the New York Jets have a great defense. They are going to have a really good offense, at least when you look at what they have from a skill position standpoint. Their offensive line is really the only big concern that we have about the New York Jets. So them getting DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook, although they probably still would be considered the worst team in the division still, I think their playoff chances increase with those two guys on the roster. They may finish fourth in the division, but there's a possibility that 4 teams from the AFC East could make it into the playoffs, because I do think that D-Hop and Dalvin make the Patriots a playoff caliber football team, because this offense will be drastically better. You can never have too many great playmakers. But then you just look at how talented the rest of this division is overall. So although they could finish in last place in this division, they could still be a team that ends up sneaking into the 7th seed of the playoffs. So I think that DeAndre Hopkins still has a lot of juice left in the tank. Like, I keep hearing people saying that DeAndre Hopkins is washed up. Like, some of y'all need to
stay off the weed.
Like, please. How was DeAndre Hopkins washed up last season when he came into the NFL season last year in 2022 and just kind of dominated right out the gate, despite having to miss the first half of the season due to a suspension? Like, some of y'all need to come on, man. Like, D-Hop is far from washed up, and you got to remember that D-Hop is a Hall of Fame caliber player. Although he is up there in his 30s, Hall of Fame caliber football players regress at a slower level compared to the average NFL player. The average NFL player, once they get to 30, they start to regress. But if you notice, players who are future Hall of Famers, they end up normally being able to play at a high level until the mid to late 30s. So DeAndre Hopkins would still bring a different element to this Patriots offense that they haven't had in years. The Patriots have been searching for a true number one receiver for years, dating back to when they acquired Josh Gordon from the Cleveland Browns. So it's been that long since the Patriots have had even a respectable number one wide receiver. And then you look at Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, I don't think he's washed neither. Dalvin Cook was one of the best running backs in the NFL last season. He's a top 10 back, and he's not even 30 years old, man. Like, what is going on to the running back market right now?
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
Like, this is Dalvin Cook. This dude put up really productive numbers with the Minnesota Vikings last year in 2022. The reason why the Vikings had to move on from him was due to the fact that they had to free up some cap space, and they had Alexander Mattison in the backfield. If they have Alexander Mattison in the backfield, I probably would do the same thing. Alexander Mattison, going from Dalvin Cook to him, isn't really going to be a big drop-off. Now, if they didn't have him behind Dalvin Cook, I don't think they move on from Dalvin. Like, do you know how good you have to be to have faith and a running back and say, you know what, we have a lot of confidence in you. We're going to end up releasing one of the best running backs in the league. Dalvin Cook is still a top 10 back. He is far from washed up. And when you look at the overall impact for what D-Hop and Dalvin Cook will bring to the New England Patriots, they may not be all that better in terms of where they rank inside the AFC East, but they have way better chances of being able to make it to the playoffs. And with these two guys on the Patriots roster, you kind of end up maybe giving Bill Belichick a little bit of the benefit of a doubt, and you say, you know, I don't know who the Patriots are going to finish over, but you probably have a little bit more confidence that they will finish at least third place or better with Dalvin Cook and D-Hop. Now, this is going to be one of those situations where somebody says, well, who are they going to be over? And you just say, I don't know. I just have faith in Bill Belichick and Bill O'Brien that they won't finish last in the division. It's not something that you're going to be able to prove on paper, and it's not something that you're going to have a lot of confidence if you were to just make this decision based off what the Patriots are going to look like on paper. But you're just going to have to give them the benefit of a doubt that you trust their coaching and that you think that these two players are good enough that they're going to be able to elevate New England over somebody, because there has to be somebody to underachieve in this division. If New England ends up playing well with Dalvin and D-Hop and everybody else, Mac Jones plays well, maybe the Dolphins could end up disappointing because maybe Tua Tagovailoa misses too many games. Maybe the Aaron Rodgers thing doesn't work out, and maybe the Buffalo Bills just completely implode. But the Patriots with Dalvin Cook and D-Hop, they are a better team with them than they are without them. And I think that we can all agree with that. Now, would they still be able to make it to the postseason in a tough division with a pretty tough schedule? I think they could. This could very well be a division that's good enough to have 4 teams in the playoffs. The Buffalo Bills seem to be a team that a lot of people are starting to sour over. You had the Stefon Diggs incident at minicamp. You have the fact that Josh Allen has become extremely reckless with taking care of the football. How good do you guys think the Buffalo Bills are going to be in 2023? Now, I believe that Buffalo is still a team that deserves to be in the Super Bowl conversation. People keep saying that the Super Bowl window for the Buffalo Bills has closed. Like, I don't believe that. And I don't really believe in the whole Super Bowl window thing. You mean to tell me in 2021 that you thought that the Bengals were going to make it to the Super Bowl? Be honest, bro. Nobody saw that coming. Just tell the truth. So I don't really believe in the whole Super Bowl window conspiracy theory that people be having. But when I look at the Buffalo Bills roster, from a talent standpoint, this is still one of the best rosters in the AFC. Their offensive line is probably the biggest question mark that we have about this team. And it's not like their offensive line is awful, but it definitely could be a little bit better than what it was last year. Now, to address the offensive line, they did sign center Connor McGovern in free agency, and they drafted Florida offensive lineman Osiris Torrance, who I think is going to have one of the biggest impacts amongst all the rookies going into this season. Now, you have Dalton Kincaid. When you look at what Buffalo has to work with in the passing game, I don't think that Dalton Kincaid is going to go off for a crazy rookie season, but I do think he will be productive. Now, most rookie tight ends don't really start going off into their 3rd year in the league. The only tight end that we've seen in recent memory to come in and go off his rookie season was Kyle Pitts, and that was about it. The tight end position is not a easy transition for somebody going from college football to the NFL. You got to learn the blocking schemes, and you also got to learn the route tree. So for Dalton Kincaid, I'm not expecting him to have a massive impact for the Buffalo Bills this season, but he definitely should have a pretty productive rookie year for tight end standards. And then that receiver, I mean, we know about Stefon Diggs, but who's going to be that second receiver to step up for the Buffalo Bills? I don't think that Gabe Davis is all that bad. I think that Gabe Davis kind of gets a little bit more hate than what he deserves because of the fantasy football community. He was somebody who was supposed to have a breakout season last year, and he didn't really do that. And the fantasy football community, like, if they don't like you and you don't perform for them and you end up being a disappointment when you were supposed to break out, they end up turning on you and never really giving you another opportunity. But I think Gabe Davis is fine. You got Khalil Shakur, who I think could end up having a bigger role in this offense than what he did last year. And then, most importantly, with your offensive coordinator who's going into his 2nd season in Ken Dorsey, is this offense going to be less dependent on Josh Allen? Because a huge reason why we saw a spike in Josh Allen's turnover numbers last year was due to the fact that they were relying on this dude to pretty much be everything, not just distribute the football, but also making him become their primary option in the running game. So you got James Cook, who I think could be a breakout player this year. He is the younger brother of Dalvin Cook. For those of you guys who look at that last name and you're wondering, yes, he is Dalvin Cook's little brother, and he's faster and a little bit more agile than what Dalvin Cook is. He also has really good hands. You can line him up in the slot. He runs pretty good routes for a running back, and also he's really great catching the ball out of the backfield. So he's going to bring a different element to this Bills offense. And then you have Nyheim Hines, you signed Damian Harris in free agency. So you do have talent at running back. The question is your offensive line going to be better in the run blocking department? If the Bills are going to be able to make it far in the postseason, they cannot be overly dependent on Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a great QB, but he's one of those quarterbacks that he's going to have some mistakes if you're asking him to go out there and win the game for you. You saw what happened in that near playoff mishap to the Miami Dolphins last year. So for the Buffalo Bills offensively, I think they're going to be fine. I do think that they may not be as good as what they have been previously, but I do think that this offense should be fine. Your concern kind of is probably going to come on the defense side of the football. Why is that? Well, because you lost Tremaine Edmonds, and Tremaine Edmonds is one of the better linebackers in the NFL, but he was definitely asking for a lot of money. You do still have Matt Milano, but I think where Buffalo could separate themselves this year and what could be a key reason why Buffalo could get over the hump this year, not saying that they will, but if you had to ask me, JT, what is one thing other than Josh Allen that the Buffalo Bills have going into the 2023 season that could finally get them into the Super Bowl? I think is going to be the fact that this is probably the most talented that this defensive line has been since Sean McDermott arrived in Buffalo. Okay, we know about Von Miller and how he had that season-ending injury, and before he had that injury, he was going guard for Buffalo. Well, this year, you got Gregory Rousseau coming off a really productive second season where he had 8 sacks. You got AJ Epinesa, who had 6.5 sacks. So just with those two guys alone going into the third years of their NFL careers, we should finally see Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa start reaching their full potential. Gregory Rousseau was a former first-round pick. This is somebody who has the potential to be a double-digit sack guy for you consistently. And AJ Epinesa should probably be around an 8-sack guy on a yearly basis. And you do have Ed Oliver, so this is the most talented that the Buffalo Bills have been on the defensive line. And if you're looking for a way to get guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow off the field, you got to be able to get pressure on those guys. You got to be able to make those guys uncomfortable. When you look at the teams that go the furthest in the playoffs, it's the teams that normally have the best pass rush. Philadelphia and San Francisco, NFC Championship. Both of those guys had good defensive lines and great pass rushes. Same thing with Kansas City and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals are a team that kind of gets overlooked, but they had Sam Hubbard and they also had Trey Hendrickson. So if you're the Buffalo Bills and you're looking for the formula to finally get into the Super Bowl, you may finally have one of the key missing ingredients that you haven't had in years prior, which is the fact that you're going to have an elite pass rush, and it's not just solely going to be based on Von Miller and how he produces. You got other guys who are going to be more than capable of being able to get pressure on the quarterback. Now, their secondary, we know how good their safety duo is. They have probably the best safety duo in the NFL in Michael Hyde, and also the fact that you got Jordan Poyer. But what about cornerback? Tre'Davious White is still pretty solid, even though I don't think he is what he used to be. You got Teron Johnson, one of, if not the most underrated slot cornerback in the game. But what about Kaiir Elam? I think Kaiir Elam, he was up and down during his rookie season. And normally you would like your rookie cornerback to end up coming out and playing well early. But Kaiir Elam, he had some stretches where he was pretty good, and he also had some stretches where he wasn't all that great. So you're going to need him to have a big season. And secondly, how is this defense going to respond with Leslie Frazier stepping down and Sean McDermott taking over play calling duties? Being the head coach is already tough as it is. You got to oversee the roster and manage the entire team, and now you're adding another responsibility on your shoulder and calling plays on defense. Now, Sean McDermott has called plays on defense in the past. He is a former defensive coordinator, and he was a really good one at that, but that's just something that you do have to take into account. But when you look at the Bills going into the 2023 NFL season, this is a team that still is most definitely in the Super Bowl conversation. Just because they've had some distractions during the offseason and they did have some key losses doesn't mean that they are a team that still shouldn't be viewed as a favorite to make it out of the AFC. I still think that this is a top 4, top 5 team. Did this division get better? Yes, it did. But the Buffalo Bills didn't get insanely worse. This is just a division that has now caught up to the Buffalo Bills. That's why I say the Bills championship window hasn't closed, but it has become increasingly tougher for the Buffalo Bills, given the fact that the Miami Dolphins have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. The New England Patriots, I don't think anybody should be sleeping on New England. And the New York Jets, if it ends up working out with Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett, they're going to be in that conversation as well, along with the Bills. So the Bills' path to the Super Bowl has gotten tougher, but this team hasn't gotten worse. This is a team that still is capable of being able to make it out of the AFC, and they may just be a tad bit underrated going into this year. If you haven't already, make sure that you guys leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, make sure that you guys are following me on all of my social media platforms. You can find me on Instagram at JTSports_ and on Twitter at JTSports__. If you have a question that you would like answered on a future episode of the podcast, make sure to submit them in the DMs on my Twitter and Instagram platforms. I read all my DMs. If I don't get back to you, I will be getting back to you soon. So if you have a question that you would like answered on a future episode, make sure to send them in via the DMs on Twitter and Instagram. And make sure that you rate the JT Sports Podcast, man. We are at 69 5-star reviews. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews on that thing before the college football and NFL seasons come around. So make sure that you go ahead and listen to the JT Sports Podcast, available on all social media platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. Let's segue to this. Now, if you are looking at the New York Jets from a non-fan perspective, you're either going to feel one or two ways about them. You either feel that this team is going to be able to make it work with Aaron Rodgers and they're going to be in the Super Bowl conversation, or you lie on the other side of the coin and you think that Aaron Rodgers is washed up and that this New York Jets Aaron Rodgers experiment is going to backfire in a major way. Now, me, when you ask me how good do I feel the New York Jets are going to be this year, I think that this team is going to be good enough to win the Super Bowl. And you may be like, JT, man, like, you tripping? You really think that the New York Jets are going to be able to win the AFC? Like, yes, I do. I think that a lot of people are overlooking one big thing about the New York Jets, and it's the fact that they had a top 3 defense in the NFL last season. Like,
come on now, dog. Come on, man.
How y'all gonna overlook the New York Jets having one of the best defenses in the NFL last season? And you gotta remember that this was a top 3 defense despite the fact that they had no quarterback and that their offense was at times completely inept at being able to move the football. When you have a bad offense, it puts your defense in bad situations, because sometimes if you have an offense that turns the football over a lot, they put your defense in bad field position, or 2, your defense is on the field for more plays than what they should be. With Aaron Rodgers being under center at quarterback, the New York Jets offense should at least be able to give the New York Jets defense way more breaks, and they shouldn't have to be on the field as much as what they were in 2022. And Aaron Rodgers, we seem to forget that a year prior to last, this dude was coming off back-to-back MVPs. So if Aaron Rodgers can play at least 80% of the level that he was during his prime years for the Green Bay Packers, I think that's good enough for the Jets to be able to make it out of the AFC. Like, this is a fantastic defense. We keep looking at the New York Jets early schedule slate, and yeah, it is tough. You got to play the Cowboys, you got to play the Buffalo Bills, the Broncos, the Chiefs, but one thing that people keep overlooking is how good this defense is. This defense is good enough to slow down some of the best offenses in the NFL. They're going to have a fantastic pass rush. All you need is for Aaron Rodgers to play better than Sam Darnold, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, and Mark Sanchez, and any of the other quarterbacks that you've had under center throwing the ball for you for the last decade for this franchise. I really believe that if the New York Jets are going to be able to make this Aaron Rodgers thing work, they have to make it work in his first season in the Big Apple. And I don't see any reason why he can't. Tom Brady did it. Everybody was doubting Tom Brady because they were saying, oh, he's going to Tampa during COVID. Like, how's he going to be able to build rapport, and how's he going to get the timing and chemistry up? And you see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ended up going all the way that year. So if you have the perfect ingredients, this thing should end up working. There are concerns that we should have about Nathaniel Hackett, but you got to remember that Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson, a large reason why they didn't work out in Denver was because Russell Wilson just wasn't a good fit in Nathaniel Hackett's scheme. Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett already have a lot of familiarity with each other, dating back to their time when they were both in Green Bay. So it's not like Aaron Rodgers is going into a situation where he has to learn a completely new system. Like, there may be some new wrinkles that he's going to have to get up to speed with, but for the most part, he should have a already good grasp on what Nathaniel Hackett is expecting from this offense. And you're probably going to give him the ability to audible out of plays and get the offense into better situations depending on what the defense comes out in. That's just what happens when you have an experienced veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. And when you look at the New York Jets supporting cast, I mean, I was going back and forth with my guy Juice a couple of days ago. He was saying he doesn't know if the New York Jets are all that good at receiver if they have a couple of injuries. Like, the New York Jets are more than fine at receiver. At this moment, they currently have Corey Davis, Denzel Mims. Both of those guys should benefit if they remain on the roster when the season begins from playing with Aaron Rodgers. You got Mecole Hardman in the slot. You got Allen Lazard, who Aaron Rodgers has a lot of familiarity with. And then you got Garrett Wilson, who was the best rookie receiver last season. So there's enough talent for Aaron Rodgers to throw the football to. As a matter of fact, this is the most talented supporting cast that Aaron Rodgers has had in a very long time. You got to remember that the only reliable weapon that he really had for the Green Bay Packers over the last 4 or 5 years was Davante Adams. So now you got multiple receivers. Even if you don't have a receiver that's on the caliber of Davante Adams, you still have multiple receivers that are going to be able to produce, and you have somebody that you're familiar with. Now, the biggest concern about the Jets offense comes when you look at their offensive line, but their offensive line is not that bad. I think this offensive line is being incredibly overlooked. They drafted Joe Tippmann in the second round of this past year's NFL draft out of Wisconsin. Do your research on Joe Tippmann. Joe Tippmann is one of the most athletic centers that I've seen in all my years covering the NFL draft. And I've been keeping up with the draft for around 8 years. This dude can move. And you got to remember that he's coming from Wisconsin. When's the last time Wisconsin had an offensive lineman that wasn't good? Like, Wisconsin, one thing about their football program is that they're going to have some really good defensive players, and they're going to have some damn good offensive linemen, man. So you got Joe Tippmann at center. If he ends up being really good his rookie season, this offensive line should not be an issue, because when you look at the key to having a good offensive line, it starts at center. And I think that Joe Tippmann potentially could be the best center that the Jets have had since Nick Mangold. You got Lakeland Tomlinson at one of your offensive guard spots, Elijah Vera Tucker at the other. Mekhi Becton is not a bust, it's just that he isn't able to stay on the field, but when he's healthy, he's really solid. So I think that the New York Jets offensive line is perfectly fine. I think that a lot of people are freaking out too much about it because, let's be honest, who really pays attention to the offensive line unless it's bad? I think that the New York Jets are going to be able to make it out of the AFC this year. And if they don't make it out, I think they're going to be up there. I think the 3 biggest threats to Kansas City and the AFC this season are the Ravens, the Bengals, and the New York Jets. This defense is way too good for people to just continue to make this thing all about Aaron Rodgers, man. Like, y'all need to put some more respect on the New York Jets defense and Robert Saleh and what he does on the defensive end of the football, man. Their defense is going to be a large reason why they end up going far, because this offense is going to be able to give you at least 20 points a game, and your defense is going to be good enough to hold most offenses to under 20. That's a winning formula. When you look at this division and you're trying to figure out how Aaron Rodgers stacks up against the young cats such as Tua and Josh Allen, I mean, he may not be up there physically, but that's why you got a great defense that can contain and slow those opposing quarterbacks and offenses down. Some of you guys need to put a little bit more respect on Robert Saleh and this New York Jets defense, man. This just isn't going to be the Aaron Rodgers show in 2023 for the Jets. If they're going to win the Super Bowl, it's going to be because they also get fantastic play out of their defense. But I expect the Jets to be amongst one of the best teams in the AFC this year. My worst case scenario for them is 9-8. My best case scenario for the New York Jets is 13-4. And if I had to give you an overall record prediction, I think they're probably going to be around between 10 to 12 wins this season. What are the Cleveland Browns' keys to the season? What do the Cleveland Browns need to do, and what players do they need to step up to have a successful season in 2023? Now, let's start off on the defensive end of the football. They need this run defense to improve. The Cleveland Browns were not great stopping the run last year. They were 25th in the NFL in rushing yards per game allowed. And if they're going to have a chance at being able to make it to the playoffs, this run defense is going to have to improve in a major way this year, because you're in a division where you have three other teams who are really good at running the football. The Cincinnati Bengals have Joe Mixon. You already know with the Baltimore Ravens, not only are they deep at running back, but they also have Lamar Jackson, who is a different animal when it comes to what he does when he decides to run the football. And then you got the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if the Cleveland Browns are going to have success this year, their run defense needs to improve drastically. Now, you do bring in new defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, who is pretty well respected amongst the NFL ranks. And you brought in more depth and more talent when it comes to the interior of your defensive line. You signed guys such as Tristan Hill, Maurice Hurst. Now, none of those two guys I just mentioned are household names, but they are guys who are going to add more depth to the Cleveland Browns interior defensive line. And plus, these are two guys who are pretty solid against the run. And then you pay big money to bring in Dalvin Tomlinson, who is one of the better interior defensive linemen when it comes to defending against the run. And then you trade for Zadarius Smith, and you're going to need Zadarius Smith to have a big impact lining up on the opposite side of Myles Garrett. That's going to be another big key to the Browns having a successful 2023 campaign. You need Zadarius Smith to give you 9 to 10 sacks. He needs to be an opposing force that offenses have to game plan for outside of Myles Garrett. Last year, Jadeveon Clowney was not that good, and the Cleveland Browns didn't really have another consistent pass rusher outside of Myles Garrett. So trading for Zadarius Smith could end up being one of the more underrated moves that we've seen take place during this offseason. And when you look at Zadarius Smith, this is somebody who still is in his prime, although he has hit that 30 landmine mark, because most pass rushers, when they get to 30, they start to decrease in production. But Zadarius Smith is still somebody who's more than capable of being able to give you 8 to 9 sacks on a yearly basis despite being in his 30s. Like, look at what Justin Houston was doing for the Baltimore Ravens. He's like up there in his 30s and he's still producing at a really high level. So if you can get 8 to 10 sacks out of Zadarius Smith, that would be huge for this defense. Now, offensively, right, they need Deshaun Watson to bounce back this year. And this is probably the most important key for the Cleveland Browns this season. If Deshaun Watson doesn't bounce back this year, the Browns are not going to be that good. You're playing in probably the toughest division in the NFL this year. You got two quarterbacks who are MVP caliber. Lamar Jackson, who already won one, and Joe Burrow, who is the second best QB behind Patrick Mahomes right now. And both the Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals are Super Bowl caliber football teams. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, although they aren't on the same level as the Ravens and the Bengals, they're a young team on the rise. So for the Cleveland Browns, if you can't get at least above average QB play out of Deshaun Watson this year, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Kenny Pickett could end up being in ascension mode in year two. Year two is where a lot of young quarterbacks start to hit their strides. That's where you start to figure out if you have the guy at QB or not. So if Kenny Pickett ends up taking that next step in his development, the Steelers are going to be a problem because they already have a good roster, and you already know what the Bengals and Ravens are capable of when everybody's able to stay healthy. So if Deshaun Watson can't play at a high level for the Browns, not only are they not going to have a shot at being able to make it to the playoffs, but it also is going to look really bad when it comes to the front office, giving Deshaun Watson all that guaranteed money, because you're giving him $250 million guarantee for him not to play at a high level. That would be one of the worst moves in the history of the NFL. Now, for Deshaun Watson to end up playing well and bouncing back, you're going to need consistency out of your wide receivers, not named Amari Cooper. We know what Amari Cooper does. He's one of the best route runners in the league. He's a really good receiver. But who's going to end up stepping up behind him? Okay, you traded for Elijah Moore, who's been getting a lot of great reviews so far, coming from his OTAs and minicamp sessions with the Browns. You got Donovan Peoples-Jones, who is a young receiver that has a lot of potential and upside. You got Cedric Tillman, who I felt was the most underrated wide receiver coming out of this past year's draft from Tennessee. So you do have talent at wide receiver behind Amari Cooper. It's just about who's going to end up stepping up and producing at a consistent level for you there. And lastly, I think that Jerome Ford is going to have a breakout season. Jerome Ford was a late round steal in last year's draft by the Cleveland Browns out of Cincinnati. I thought that he was a top 3 running back coming out of that draft class. He's great after contact, has fantastic vision. I don't think the Cleveland Browns are losing anything getting rid of Kareem Hunt. Like, them drafting Jerome Ford and moving on from Kareem Hunt after last season, I felt was always the plan for them. I don't think they need to bring in another running back like some people are suggesting. Like, Jerome Ford is going to be a beast behind Nick Chubb. So these are my keys to success, what the Cleveland Browns need to do to have a successful season. Let me know if there are some things that you think I should have added on here. What do you feel the Browns need to do to have success during the 2023 NFL season? Let me know down in the comment section down below. USC, is this team good enough to make it to the college football playoffs this year? Now, last year, they were fantastic in year one under Lincoln Riley. And I was really surprised when Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma for USC. And I don't blame him for leaving. It's just that at that time, you weren't really seeing a lot of big-name coaches leaving big-name programs for other big-name programs. But you can't blame Lincoln Riley, and the move paid off because USC had a lot of success during the 2022 college football season. Now, they came up short of making it to the college football playoffs because they lost to Utah in the Pac-12 championship. And a large reason why USC was unable to make it to the playoffs last year was due to the fact that they had no defense at all.
Damn!
So is USC under Alex Grinch going to have a defense that's capable of being able to get this program back to the top of college football? If you're going to be a championship caliber football team, you have to be able to play some sort of defense. Now, I don't think that you need to have one of the best defenses in college football, but I do think that you at least need to be a top 50 defense at worst and able to put yourself in the college football conversation. And that's always been the biggest bugaboo about Lincoln Riley. We know that USC is going to have a great offense. Caleb Williams returns. They have a lot of talent at wide receiver, but this defense is going to make or break if USC is going to be able to get to the college football playoffs this year. Now, they were really active in the transfer portal once again. And some key transfers that I think they picked up was Bear Alexander, transfer from the University of Georgia. He plays defensive tackle. This dude has incredible size. He's a really good athlete. You also got defensive end Anthony Lucas, who was the 6th ranked defensive end in the transfer portal. He comes from Texas A&M. This dude is an incredible athlete himself. He's like 295 pounds. He's really freakish. So USC picks him up. And then you get linebacker out of Oklahoma State, Mason Cobb. This was somebody who was really productive for the Cowboys last season. 51 tackles, 2 sacks, and he had a forced fumble and an interception. And that cornerback, one of my favorite additions that they made was Christian Roland Wallace from Arizona State. He was the 6th best cornerback in the transfer portal. And you pair that up with a Kalen Bullock, who is one of the better safeties in college football. USC is going to have a nasty secondary. And I think that's the most important thing for USC being able to win the Pac-12, because the Pac-12 is where the majority of college football's best quarterbacks reside. You got Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and you're also going to have to worry about Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, and Cam Rising. So when you're going against some of the best quarterbacks in college football, you're going to need a secondary that cannot give up big plays. And for USC, unless this defense was able to get a key turnover, they weren't getting too many stops. Now, they returned 78% of their production from the defensive side of football this year. And offensively, this should still be one of the best offenses in the nation. Caleb Williams is the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. He already won it last year. He very well could go back-to-back. You got a very good group of wide receivers. I was talking to one of my homies. He was like, JT, like, I'm concerned about how USC is going to fare losing Jordan Addison to the Minnesota Vikings. I was like, man, one thing that you know about Lincoln Riley is that you know the defense probably isn't going to be all that great, but offensively, you have nothing to worry about. It's like All-State with Lincoln Riley. You're in very good hands, because not only is he really good at developing the quarterback position, but he also does really good when it comes to getting great play out of his wide receivers. Like, we talk about all of the QBs that have won the Heisman and made it to the NFL under Lincoln, but we don't give him enough credit for the wide receivers that he's developed and recruited as well. And you got Mario Williams, who is one of the best receivers in this conference. Dorian Singer transfers in conference. He was with Arizona last year. He transfers to USC. He's one of the better wide receivers in the Pac-12. You got Brendan Rice. And you also got true freshman wide receiver Zachariah Branch, who was the #1 wide receiver coming out of this past recruiting cycle. And this dude has been compared to Tyreek Hill and some of the fastest wide receivers to ever come out of college football. And when you look at this guy's speed, it's just way too much for him not to be on the field this year. Like, I don't care if he's not the most polished route runner or whatever. Like, if you have a guy who has this kind of speed that Zachariah Branch has, you're going to find a way, if you have a Lincoln Riley at head coach, to get this man involved in the offense. He's somebody who could end up being on your true freshman All-American team this year. And at running back, you're straight there. You got Austin Jones. You got Marshawn Lloyd from the transfer portal, who comes from South Carolina. Now, Marshawn Lloyd was highly touted coming out of high school. And over the last couple of seasons for South Carolina, he dealt with a big injury, and he's kind of been trying to get back to the player that he was prior to that major injury that he suffered. So if you're USC, can you get Marshawn Lloyd playing at his potential? And you're going to have a really good offensive line. This should be one of the best offensive lines in the Pac-12 this season. So USC, I think that they have the talent in place in order to have a shot at winning the Pac-12. Even with one loss, I think the Pac-12 is deep enough that if you have one loss, you can still be able to have a shot at making it into the college football playoffs, or at least have a very reasonable argument to get in. Because they have a really tough in-conference schedule. Like, I know their out-of-conference isn't going to scare anybody. San Jose State and Nevada, you should be able to take care of those guys. And you should be able to win your first 5 games. You got to play San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, Arizona State on the road, Colorado on the road, and then you got Arizona. So you should be 6-0 until you get into the meat and potatoes of your schedule, which is where things start to get incredibly tough for USC. They have one of the toughest schedules in college football after their first 6 games. You got to go on the road against Notre Dame. You got to play Utah. You got to play Cal, which Cal could be an interesting matchup, because you got to remember that you have to play Cal on the road, and you're coming off back-to-back games against Notre Dame, who you play them at home in South Bend, and you got to play Utah at home. So that's a really tough 2-game slate that they're going to be going in, coming off against Cal. And then after Cal, you got to play Washington at home, and then you got Oregon. So that is going to be a really tough slate that they're going to have after they potentially start 6-0. Now for USC, my worst case scenario for them, my floor if everything goes wrong, is 9 wins. Okay, I think Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, and even that Cal game are losable games. I think the Cal game is a losable game simply for the fact that it's a great upset spot. You're coming off back-to-back games against Notre Dame and Utah. You're a little bit beat up because Utah is the most physical team in the Pac-12. So you're going to go into that Cal game with a pretty slim chance of being able to be upset. I'm not saying that they're guaranteed to lose that game, but that is a game that could end up being an upset. And you got to remember that the Pac-12 is a conference that normally has a lot of their upsets taking place around this portion of the season. Then you got Washington and Oregon, who are up there with USC in terms of who potentially could make it out of this conference and make it to the college football playoffs this year. So those are going to be two of your toughest games, two of your best teams that you play all season up to that point. Although Utah and Notre Dame are going to be up there too, but Washington and Oregon are playoff caliber football teams also. But I do think the ceiling for USC, for me, is 11 wins. I think they could go 11-1 and win the Pac-12. You got to look at the fact that this team is going to be great offensively. They're going to have great quarterback play. And hopefully this defense can improve under Alex Grinch. They got a lot of talent from the transfer portal. You got a lot of depth on the interior of your defensive line. Your secondary should be really good. So for USC, if this defense can at least be in the top 50 or better, they have a great chance of being able to make it to the college football playoffs. So let me know how you guys are feeling about USC football going into the 2023 season. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed, make sure that you leave a like and subscribe. We go live every day, Monday through Friday. Make sure to give us a 5-star review if you enjoy the JT Sports Podcast and you want to support the pod. The best way to do so is by giving us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. All you got to do is go to whichever podcasting service you like to use, type in the JT Sports Podcast and rate us 5 stars, or you can go down to the description, scroll down a little bit, and there will be the link to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in.